Good day, my friends, good day, and welcome to the first video leading up to the end of the campaign of Lunar Rise, number 1, the Of Time and Space saga. I come to you today to talk a little bit about some characters in the book. Now, I've talked a lot about Onixia in the description. Being the main character, he is sort of the most important one in the story, but, being the narrator and the person who draws us through this tale, he is very important, that is true, from the very get-go. Now, I hold in my hand this wonderful first draft printing book, if you want to call it a first draft. This was the draft of First Tale of the Universe, which is a perk on the campaign. It is a making of book. I have gone over it on another video on this channel if you want to go back and see that. But in this book, I talk a lot about the characterizations, character designs, and things like that. So this page was all about. These two pages here were all about Onixia and his inception. And going back, you can see how much characterization I put, design I put into this work, and then had other designers, jump on top of that. So what I'm going to do in the rest of this video series, I just wanted to do a personal introduction here, is talk more basically over some stills, and then talk a little bit about the characters from that point. So this is an introduction as an amendment to the other introduction video I did about the importance of getting our backers up over the next few days. But I wanted to make sure that I spoke to you directly on camera and told you what's going to happen and things like that. So moving on from that, we're just going to look at some still images that I have saved, and I'll do some voiceover work on top of that. So let's get right to it. Okay, so to start talking about Onixia, I have to go back and talk about the Angelos a little bit. The Angelos kind of came as development in around 2003 when I was rewriting the story for the first time, and I wanted an angel-like race in the story, but I originally designed them sort of really monstrous looking. They had sort of like bent-in legs and a tail, and 4 arms essentially, because the top 2 arms were the wings. Kind of like trying to rationalize the angel form, if you will, in a real world sort of setting. But that quickly went away, and I went back to the design, and we got the design with the horns and everything like that later on. So that's how it started, though. So talking more about his character now. So once I decided to go back and rewrite the first part of Time and Space, using him as the main character and sort of the narrator, I needed to develop his character, obviously. And throughout the ages, I knew that he was going to be the the driving force behind the plot. Like, his story coincided with what was going on in the grander world of things. So he would be the narrator from beginning to end. So what that means is I either had to make him really long-lived or immortal. The original version was immortal, but I dropped the immortality stick because that seemed a little bit too Gary Stewish, if you will, if he couldn't be hurt. So I really wanted to immortalize him, but also give him this long life. So the Angelos live for, a few thousand years, just because of their relationship to the Drag-Eye, the fact that they have this connection to the divine and whatnot, and that's pretty much the whole reasoning behind that. So once I got that in place, I needed to work on his characterizations a bit, and I sort of designed him to be like more of a blank slate type character, but he still has a pretty decent personality. He's an extremely loyal type character. He and his mentor in the book, they have like a special relationship that's basically like a father and son type relationship.
if I was to put it in any context. Um, so he sort of trained him from a child, and we get to see Onixia as a child in the book. It's kind of our first introduction to him when he's like 10 years old. Uh, so you know, from that point, it skips ahead a little bit, and he's more of like a young adult at that time, sort of like in the range of like 30 years old or so. So uh, he's still very young for his species, of course, because they're so long lived. And that young sort of mentality, even though he's got some talent, he's a very talented fighter only because he's been trained very well by Phasnion, his father type figure. He's like a judicer, which is like a very high rank in the Angelos um, society, and he's sort of like a grand judicer. So he's been around a while. He's trained a lot of people, but Onixia was his newest trainee, and something that happens in their past kind of changes Phasnion, so that he's a kinder person, and it really sort of sets that sort of incident sort of sets them on this new path, and Phasnion really sort of molds Onixia's spirit, if you will, as well. It makes him a more sort of in tune sort of character with that sort of side of himself. So that kind of brings us to where we are in the story, and that just collecting my thoughts here. Sorry. So that kind of brings us to where we're in the story, and it sort of shapes the character that he is. So he is a very loyal, well-trained soldier who follows his mentor's wishes and concerns and whatnot. And eventually, not to spoil anything, but he has to set out on his own. It's his rite of passage sort of journey at the end of the book, and that's sort of where the book leaves off with him walking off into the sunset, so to speak, on the surface. And all I can really say is what happens next in part 2 with him having to deal with the crisis of the world, which I'll talk about next. Ragos, he's going to be the subject of the next video. He really has to buckle down and become a leader as well as just a fighter, and he struggles quite a bit with taking on leadership roles, which in a way sort of mirrors myself in that respect. So he is in some respects part of, or takes some cues from my personality. It's always good to write from what you know, and it's a good way to explore things. But he's not me per se, like one to one. But that's where the general like that's where the general like construction of the character comes from. I was looking for the right word to use there. So that gives you a little idea of what he's like. Being sort of the observational storyteller, he's got personality, but he also allows for some self-insert into the role, and that will be his role throughout the entire series of Time and Space. So I'm going to thank you for watching at this point, and I'm going to move on to the next character in the next video, Ragos. I hope you subscribe, I hope you back the project, and together we can make a really good series for this. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe and back Of Time and Space Lunar Rise Issue 1 on Indiegogo. Link in the description. Thank you.